So today I have like a giant zit on my lip, but I don't care. In case you're distracted by that, that's what that is. But anyway, I'm gonna be making a video today. So like, I just kind of made a video where I was having a conversation with my friend about a dude that I was just dating, and like, you know how I'm still learning about all this stuff as I go, and just because I post a bunch of videos talking about abuse doesn't mean that I have like a total freaking grip on it myself. So anyway, this thing's still kind of been like ongoing, and one thing that I've really been using right now that I realize I haven't really made a video about is my plumb line. And I kind of talked about my plumb line in another video that I did like way back, but I haven't really like expanded on it, and I don't know, I'm just going to do another video just about my plumb line because this is something that's really helped me, and for friends that I have who are also trauma survivors who struggle with like being in and out of abusive relationships, some version of this also like really helps them. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about my plumb line. So what is a plumb line? I guess it's just kind of like a term that I came up with. You know, like I am a Christian, and in the Bible, they talk about how like God is your plumb line. Like God is something that you measure everything else against as a standard to see whether it is straight and true or right. But religion aside, that's kind of where I first got that term. And so I guess I kind of just like took it, and in my head now I use it to mean like the standard that I'm holding everything in my relationship against to see if I'm being abused. Because again, you get in this kind of like fog where you don't really know what's up and what's down, and you have to have something to measure everything against. Otherwise you're going to get like really lost in that fog, and it makes it 10 times harder to leave that person. And so I guess that's what I kind of mean by my plumb line, is the different tools that I use to help myself remember what I originally like wanted out of this relationship, the morals that I originally went into the relationship with. I don't want those morals to change. I don't want those standards and expectations and hopes and dreams of what I actually wanted out of the relationship to fade away, to where I forget what it is that I wanted for myself. I forget the standard that I wanted to hold myself and my partner to, and everything sort of becomes warped and changed to become just all about what this other person wants and this moral standard that this other person has instead. And I, in essence, become lost. So I guess my plumb line is me holding on to my original self. And there's several different tools that I use, but I kind of almost wanted to talk about it in terms of like, you know, in every situation, my plumb line looks different. With every guy that I'm with, my plumb line looks different because they are their own person. The issues that arise are different with each person. And so it's not like I use the same tools every single time. Some guys, it's really easy for me to leave them. Like I'll recognize their crap and I'll be like, oh, this is what this is, and I leave. And other guys are like way more addictive for me, and it's like way harder for me to leave them. And that's where I really have to use my plumb line a lot more, and it usually takes me more attempts, and I guess using more tools to actually leave eventually. It's not like I could just pick up one tool and use that and then I'm like, I realize the truth and I'm done. It's just more complex. So I'm going to use this guy that I was just involved with as kind of an example, just so you can see like what I'm talking about and how this kind of works. So I met a guy, and I felt that instant chemical attraction, which automatically is like a red flag for me now. I mean, it just is. Like, I can't think of a single person for me personally that I've met where if I had a chemical attraction to them, there didn't end up being like something super toxic that happened later down the road. It's just once I get that like adrenaline rush hit of like, I feel something really intense here, like I feel drawn to them like a moth to a flame, that's like a huge red flag. So I felt that for him. And I was like, great, here we go. And the other thing that I notice, and this is something that I still struggle with, is like, so I notice stuff like that, but what I struggle with, and I talk to my friends and my therapist about this, is I still struggle with having apathy. So like I notice the red flags, I notice that you know, I'm seeing indicators that this is probably not a good idea, and I proceed anyway because it's hard for me to care sometimes. It's hard for me to care that I'm going to get hurt. It's hard for me to care for my own needs, and that's exactly what happened with this dude. So went forward, moved forward with everything. You know, just to summarize the whole event, cut to the chase, it all ended up being a train wreck, and it actually ended up being like way more abusive than I expected. It got like way more abusive way more quickly than I was even like prepared for. I mean, the way that he talked to me, the way that he put me down, the obsessiveness that he showed, at one point we'd only known each other a month, and he literally told me that he owned me. And I was like, great, and I got to work on caring about that you said that. I mean, it's really that real. Like, people say stuff like that to me, and I'm just like, oh, that is such a red flag. I don't care, though. Like, I really should care about that. Anyway, where I started to really use my plumb line, because I don't start using my plumb line right away. If I'm getting involved with a toxic person, I'm usually like, wee, honeymoon stage. Like, let the slip and slide last forever, right? And it never freaking does. But so when I started getting like really depressed, and when things started like really getting bad to where he was making me like cry a lot and question my sanity and things like that. And that can still happen to me. That can still happen to me sometimes. But one of the first tools I used with my plumb line, you know, like it used to be when I was younger, I would just, if I felt like somebody was going to leave, which is like a huge power move that these people have, right? Like, oh, I'm going to leave, I'm going to break up with you. And then it sends us into a freaking spiral. I used to really panic about that. And one of the first plumb line tools that I use is, you know, if I start feeling that panic where I'm just like, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave, because they're talking about leaving, I have to make myself pause and like slow down my nervous system or my adrenal glands or whatever's going on, my fight or flight crap. And I have to really almost like ask myself the question, why does it matter if this person leaves? Is this person so important that it actually matters if they leave? Like, why do I care if they leave? What are the things about them that are so valuable that I care if they leave? And I don't talk that out with them. I write that out for myself. Writing is like a huge part of my plumb line. And so that's what I did with this guy. One of the first few times that he threatened to leave, you know, that really made my body want to start having anxiety about being abandoned, about not having any freaking worth, because I must not have worth if this person doesn't want to date me, you know, like all this outdated stuff that my brain still thinks sometimes. And it's a very like knee-jerk thing where I have to like, it'll start to do that. It'll start to have those thoughts, and I have to like slow it down, usually through writing, and write out like, okay, let's logically examine the panic. Why does this person matter? And that's also where I've talked about it in another video, but if you have a list of what you're looking for in a guy, I had a list. And that's also part of my plumb line that keeps me tethered to the reality of what I wanted for myself before I met the person that started trying to groom me. Old me made a list, or single me. Person who was, Ehren, who was grounded in herself, made a list of what she was looking for in a guy. When I start feeling this panic because this guy's like, I'm going to leave, I go back to that list and I look at that list, and he has like almost none of the qualities on there for what I was actually wanting in a man. And so then when I'm asking myself the question, when I'm writing out the question, does it actually matter if this person leaves? It'll help me feel better a little bit. Not to be like, oh, he's a jerk and I'm perfect or anything like that. But I look at the list of things that I was wanting, old me, grounded me, I guess I should call her. And I start writing, and I'm like, you know, I don't know if it matters if he leaves, because he's actually not what I'm looking for. And so even if he doesn't want me, that's okay, because I'm not even sure if I want him. And so that's kind of a part of one of the first things that I used in my plumb line this time was starting to journal that type of stuff. The other part of my plumb line that I started using early on with this guy is if I notice something that I feel like they've lied to me about, I write it down right away, because I'll forget it, and I know I'll forget it. The denial will start to kick in like very quickly. And so if I really pay attention to what people tell me, I guess because I've been involved with so many pathological liars, but if they told me something about themselves and then I notice a detail in a story later that contradicts what they said, one of the biggest things I've had to change is trying to process everything with these people. There's such an important thing. It's so powerful and it's so helpful if you process some of this stuff alone. And so I don't tell them like, hey, I'm keeping a list of all the ways that you're like showing me that you're a liar. Like, why would you do that? You can't do that. But I do start keeping a list. The other thing I start keeping a list of is if there's something that happens with us that feels like a red flag to me, I know my brain's going to want to forget it later. And so I'll keep a list of that too. And so I start forming this list of things that it's basically my red flag list. And I usually don't show it to people right away, which is also a red flag, because secret keeping usually means you're in a relationship that isn't healthy. Not always, but usually, because if you're not telling people about the toxic crap or the bad things, we'll just call them bad things. If you're not telling people about some of the bad things going on in your relationship, I would just pose the question to you, why? Why are you not processing that with like people that you trust? For me, it's usually because I don't want to see it yet. I don't want the party to end. I don't want the honeymoon stage to end. And so I know if I talk to my trusted people, they're going to tell me something that I don't want to hear. So I know myself well enough that I know that I don't want to share the list of red flags with anyone yet, but I still collect and document things on the red flag list for myself so that when the time comes that I am ready to talk to my trusted people about it, I will at least have that list ready, because my brain really will compartmentalize stuff and forget it. And then when it comes time to talk to my friends about like, hey, help me understand if I'm in a bad situation or not, I won't have anything to share with them because my brain will have put everything in a box and put the lid on it. And then I'll be like, I just don't think he's good for me. I don't know what else to say right now. And they're like, yeah, that's not really helpful. That's really vague. So I don't know how to give you feedback. And then it's not beneficial, you know? And so that's kind of like the next part of my list is my trusted people. I have trusted people that I go to for feedback. I don't go to everybody. A lot of these trusted people, I say a lot, there's like 3 of them. All 3 of my trusted people I've known for a really long time. So, you know, they've been vetted in a sense to where I know they're not just yes men. They're not just going to say yes to everything and share the same opinion as me and just tell me what I want to hear. But I also trust that they know me well enough that if I tell them like, hey, this is how I behaved in this situation, they're going to give me real feedback based on like how I've been in other situations, how it sounds like I'm being this time. And then they're going to give me real feedback about the guy, you know, because they know that I really am trying to assess it and be as honest with myself as possible. It's not just about like sitting there and bashing on the guy and making me feel like I'm awesome. That's not the point of your plumb line. If that is the point of your plumb line, you will never get genuine feedback for yourself and you'll never grow and learn from these experiences. Part of it is receiving feedback about yourself. You need to know what you're doing so that these things can stop, so you can stop making the same mistakes all the time. At least that's what I do. So my trusted people in my plumb line aren't yes men. They're people that give me feedback about the guy. They're people who give me feedback about myself. And they don't all give the same feedback. And so that's what I notice the most about my plumb line is when I'm ready to actually receive, when things have finally gotten bad enough to where I'm like, okay, I really need help getting out of the pit now. I am in the pit. And I turn to my friends. If there's something that all of them are saying, because it's not always the same feedback, if there's things that all of them are saying, I automatically trust their judgment over mine. And that's been a really hard thing to come to terms with, but you just have to understand that your brain can't be trusted sometimes. Your brain is the thing that's groomed. You are the thing that's groomed. And so it is possible that you can't trust your own logic, that you can't trust your own mind, especially because like if you're high in a sense off of this person, your brain's going to be in denial. It's going to be delusional. It's going to lie to you to try to get more of the drug. There's just like a whole thing going on with your brain. And so sometimes you have to borrow other people's logic, other people's perspective. You have to trust that they can see. You can't see the forest through the trees. So you have to trust that they maybe can see something that you can't see because they're not in a chemical fog like you are. But a lot of times our denial wants to say, well, they just don't understand the person like I do. Part of that may be true, but most people can understand unhealthy behavior pretty quickly. Like, it's not that hard to recognize. So those are the first few things that I start doing for myself, right? I start making my list, I start journaling with myself about like, okay, let's really examine the logic here. Like, why does it actually matter if this person leaves? Sometimes I have to write these things out multiple times because I'll write it out and it'll make me feel like a little bit better, and then I'll start having anxiety again that maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe it does actually mean that I'm worthless if this person leaves. All these illogical thoughts, it's really like a battle because you're trying to rewire your brain. So start journaling, start making my list, I start documenting things. Then it reaches the phase where things are getting bad enough that now I'm asking for trusted feedback from my trusted people. I have a therapist that I personally also trust for feedback because she's dealt with lots of trauma survivors. She's done couples counseling where she's seen narcissistic and psychopathic abuse. She's kind of seen it from all aspects, so I trust her as well to kind of see things for what they are. Doesn't mean that that's when I leave though. So that's like level 2 or stage 2 or whatever. After I receive my feedback from people, then I enter into the difficult period where I know the truth, but I don't care. That's just me. Everyone kind of goes through these things differently. Some people stay in denial for like a very, very long time and they don't get to a phase 3 like I do. But with me, my demons have never been that I can't see stuff for what it is. I mean, maybe in the beginning it's like that, but my demons have more so been, once I started figuring a lot of this stuff out about these types of relationships, my problem now is apathy, is not caring, is saying that, my brain will say, well, there's such an opportunity to get high out of this and to have good moments that are good. Why should we leave? Because where I'm at in my journey is I'm getting to the point now where I can actually recognize stuff while I'm still in the honeymoon stage, which is actually kind of crazy. And I think that's what makes it so difficult for me right now, is because things are kind of bad, but they're not like terrible when I'm starting to recognize stuff. And that makes it difficult for me sometimes because what I say to my therapist is it almost feels like you're laying in like this really warm, like in drug addict culture, they call it the pink cloud. That's where you're getting your like first high, or like when you first get sober, everything just feels like amazing. And you're like, it's all going to be okay. I'm sober and like nothing bad happens anymore. Oh my God. And then like the first bad thing happens to you while you're sober and you're just like, why did I get sober? This was like a horrible decision. And you like crash off your pink cloud. But anyway, that's what the pink cloud is in sober culture. In this though, the pink cloud, I feel like is the honeymoon stage of the relationship, where you're just like in this nice warm bed and everything just feels like a fantasy, and it's a high, it's a freaking high. And it's so hard to convince myself to get out of the bed, like so hard, because I am catching glimpses of red flags and like, yeah, there's mean things that they say to me and I'm supposed to care about getting my feelings hurt, and all this stuff, but like I don't, because I'm on the pink cloud, I'm in the warm bed, and I'm just like, the bad isn't so bad yet that it actually hurts. The bad is just bad enough to where I can see the road we're headed down. And I have to remind myself, and this is the next part of my plumb line, I have to remind myself that there are really bad things farther down the road. And I haven't seen them yet, and they haven't happened yet, but they're going to. And so this is another skill that I actually learned from a sober group I was in, whose name I can't remember now. But it's called playing the tape out. And this one actually helps me a lot right now. When I first learned it, I was like, that's freaking stupid. You can't just like talk to yourself about what's supposedly going to happen and it actually makes you care. But it actually makes me care like a lot, because so what happens is I talk to my friends, I get the feedback, I'm seeing the red flags, I get the confirmation from my trusted people that the things that I was suspecting are indeed correct, and I am with a person who's like probably emotionally abusive, or in this case, potentially physically abusive, and now I have to try to care. And one of the ways that I help myself care is by playing the tape out. And so you can play the tape out in lots of different ways. You can play the tape out by actually like going into your mind and trying to be like, okay, this dude just told me that he owns me and he gets upset when I wear skinny jeans. Let's play the tape out. What's that gonna look like? Like, he's talking to me like that after 30 days. What do you think he's gonna freaking do after 60 days? Do you think maybe he's gonna buy you a job and like ask you to give him keys to your apartment so that he can check out your outfits before you go to work? And like, you know what I mean? Like, it sounds kind of crazy, but like, actually play the tape out. If that's like level 1 behavior, and there's the potential to go to level 10, what the fuck does level 10 look like? I mean, you gotta care about that stuff. It's hard to care about that stuff, but you gotta care about that stuff. The other way that so that's one way I play the tape out, is just being like, okay, this is level 1. What's a worse version of that look like? And then like really using that to motivate me. You know, the fact that like maybe right now, they don't respect my time. Like, you know, if I'm taking this college class and this guy felt like he still had the right to call me like every 30 minutes, even though I told him I needed to study. Okay, well, if that's level 1, what he's doing right now at level 1, let's play the tape out and see what that looks like at level 10. And that's not him like loving me more and calling me more. No, that's him like not respecting my time on an even worse level, to where he might be like, yo, you didn't answer your phone when I called. Where were you? Like right now it's annoying because it's just him calling me a lot, but like he's obviously calling out of some attempt to control me, right? That's why he's calling. It's not because he has such a deep love for me who he doesn't know because he's only known me for 30 days so he can't know me. It's not that. It's a control tactic. He wants to make himself my entire world. And so eventually, if he is not my entire world, he's probably going to get mad, right? So when you play the tape out with that, it's probably something where it's like, why didn't you answer your phone? Where were you? That type of control, you know? So that's one way you can play the tape out. The other way that I play the tape out is I watch documentaries on people who were abused, who got murdered and stuff. And I know that sounds really crazy, but like when I watch videos on people who like were in incredibly physically abusive or emotionally abusive relationships and something really, really horrible happened to them, when I'm watching them and they're talking about like all the red flags that the person saw or all the red flags that were there early in the relationship, I get like a gut freaking reminder when I'm watching that stuff, where I'm just like, oh, this person reminds me of the guy that I'm with right now. And it helps me play the tape out, you know? Ultimately, one thing that I stay aware of the whole time, since I've become aware of the thing that I try to stay aware of, is I never want them to be able to completely remove my ability to feel indignation for myself, to feel upset for myself on a level that's almost like angry on behalf of myself. Because that's really what, after like watching a lot of different videos about people who, you know, have survived domestic abuse, or even after I've survived different situations that I've survived, the one thing that really saved my ass at the end of the day was there was some moral boundary, that even though they were trying to break down all my boundaries, all of my expectations for myself, things like that, there was always one that ended up being the one that made me so upset for myself that I finally left. And their goal, whether they know it or not, is to try to break down all of those boundaries so that you no longer have the ability to be upset on behalf of yourself. And I never want it to get to that point where there is no boundary left that they can cross and walk over, where I don't get upset anymore, because that is ultimately the thing that saved me. That righteous anger, that anger motivates me to leave. That anger motivates me to block them and tell them to screw off. That anger motivates me to care about myself again. And that's probably like the last part of my plumb line, is where I will really also try to think about and sometimes I have to write it out, like the details, not the details from their perspective, but just like almost factually, because with a lot of these guys, it'll be like, I did this thing because, and so we get the because reason stuck in our head. So anytime we think about like what they did to us, we'll have the because part in our head as well, right? So we'll be like, oh, they cheated on me, but it was because of blah, blah, blah. Well, if I need to remind myself of how inappropriate the relationship has gotten, I will write out just the facts without the because part. and I will read that. I will read that. So like if it's like, oh, he's cheated on me. No, because just he's cheated on me. He's hit me. He's told me that I'm stupid. He promised me that he wouldn't hang up on me anymore, and he still does it. He said that he would value my time, but he continues to call me all the time when I need to study. He told me that, you know, he would do X, Y, and Z for me, and then he didn't. Like all these different things, just stating the facts. I will write all of that out, and then I will read it. And I will try to read it like this is something my friend is going through. I'll try to read it like the story my friend has told me about what she's going through with a guy. And if I read that, because usually this works for me, if I read that and I go, wow, I would never think my friend should put up with behavior like that, then that probably means that I've been groomed and brainwashed a little bit into tolerating some behavior that I shouldn't. I just think it's important to remember at the end of the day, even for myself, that there is not a single situation I've ever gotten out of on my own, ever. There has always been the feedback I received from someone else, or the help I've received, the emotional support I've received from someone else, that has helped me get out of these situations. I wouldn't dare to call it impossible, but I would call it near to impossible. Your brain is being broken by someone. Your brain is being damaged and handicapped. And that doesn't make it literally 100% impossible to leave someone like that. You can burn out and you can still find the truth. And I believe and I hope someone can do that if they don't have anyone around them. But if you have people around you who love you and care about you, please utilize them. And more than anything else, also please utilize your own voice. Journaling is so powerful, especially because it documents the journey. We forget the journey. We forget how things were. We think we remember how things were in the beginning with people like this, but we don't actually remember accurately. The brain lies to us. And so if you really make a point of journaling, even just a sentence, even just writing down a sentence like, they lied to me in this kind of way today. They hurt me in this kind of way today. If you start doing that early on, and you don't even have to look at it again, just write it down. Just write it down. It takes 2 seconds. Email it to yourself. Text it to yourself. Whatever you need to do. I have like texting chains upon chains of text messages sent to myself. I have an entire email chain that I started. I mean, whatever you need to do, just get the thoughts down, because there will be a day where you will wish that you could remember how it all started and how it all actually was. You will feel like you are in a tornado, and the tornado is them and all of the things they're constantly throwing at you. And you will wish that there is something you could use to make it stop, so that you could remember what was up and what was down, and how did this start, and how was I in the beginning, and is this actually how it's always been, because they're telling me this is how it's always been. You know what I mean? And if you start leaving those little breadcrumbs for yourself, because that's truly what they are breadcrumbs of truth, you will find your way back out of the forest. And you will, if you have people that can help you, that's so important, because these people are beautiful storytellers. They really are. They are good at what they do. And you are not weak, and you are not a failure as a person just because you're falling for this stuff. They're convincing. They're con artists. There's a reason why this has worked for them over and over and over again. It's because they've cultivated it, and they're good at what they do. They're really good at what they do. And so you can try and just muscle through and not use any of these tools and just hope one day you'll wake up and magically know the truth for yourself. But a lot of times it doesn't work like that. A lot of times it requires a lot of effort and a lot of diligence in trying to pursue the truth when you're not really ready for it yet, but you want to help your future self be ready for it. You know, that's really how I consider it. Everything that I'm doing is for the future Erin, when she is ready to leave, to look back and pick up all this stuff that she left documented for her, all of these breadcrumbs, so that she can get out easier with some confidence left and with some understanding left. And the last thing I will say about that, based on everything that I just said, is you cannot process your plumb line with your abuser. You can't. You just can't. They are obviously going to try and dismantle that and rip it apart as best they can. So if this person is still a trusted person to you, that's fine. But I'm just letting you know, do your future self a favor and just do this for yourself. Don't process it with them. You you can process it with them, but I'm just saying don't let them dismantle it. Don't let them tell you to delete it. Don't let them convince you to burn it down and not, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're going to leave breadcrumbs for yourself, you have to keep them hidden and you have to keep them secret. Because obviously if someone wants you to get lost in a forest, they're not going to want you to find the way back out. So if you're building a way to escape later, that's going to do nothing but upset them. And I know that makes it sound like all this is very insidious, but it just is. I mean, whether they wake up one day and plan to be this person or not, and many of them didn't, it's a very dark type of behavior that's very controlling. I mean, these people are addicted to power and control. And so obviously if you're doing something that would make them lose power and make them lose control over you, that's not going to make them happy. That's going to really upset them. And so for your own future safety, this is something that you need to do in private by yourself. And so just to close this, I just wanted to give you like an example of what this looks like when you're journaling to yourself. I just wanted to read you some of the things that I've written in the past about some of these different guys. That's actually still helping me today sometimes because they're all the same and I'm kind of always the same sometimes too. So anyway, this was about one guy. I said, have you ever considered that you don't actually fully know what he's capable of? If he's lying to you about some things, and that means that he might be lying to you about everything, then maybe you don't actually know him as a person at all or what he is fully capable of in terms of hurting you. So that's one thing that I wrote. Here is another thing that I wrote. I wrote down the belief, the illogical belief I had. I said the belief, adding him on Snapchat won't do any damage. And then I tried to hold myself accountable by writing a truth. Adding him on Snapchat could lead to him stalking you and also lead to the temptation of actually meeting up in person. You remember with him how contact is a slippery slope. It escalates very quickly. Do you really think it would stay at just talking on Snapchat? Once the slip and slide starts, it nearly can't be stopped. The demons want you to start the slip and slide so that it can't stop. Don't start it. There you go. Here is another thing that I wrote. This guy talked trash about a girl that he worked with who he thought, that's something they always do. Like when I'm not even jealous about a girl, they'll act like I'm jealous about the girl. And I think part of that's because of their ego, because they just like want to believe that everyone's like jealous and possessive of them. But I think it's also just like a power move to try and like put you down, whatever. I digress. So anyway, he was talking, there was a girl that he worked with, and I was just asking him a freaking question about her, and he tried to put her down. She was really pretty, and he tried to put her down for being a Christian. But then at the same time, he always propped me up for being a Christian, telling me that it was a reason that he really respected me, that he really enjoyed that about me. He thought it was like so cool that I was like really passionate about God and stuff. But then he put this girl down. And was like, oh, no, she's so annoying to me because she's a Christian, like trying to comfort me with that fact. That's a contradiction. That's him using the same thing in different ways, depending on what he needs the perspective to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I documented that because I was like, that seems two-faced, and I don't like that. And then this is the last one that I'll read. It's like a little bit longer, but sometimes I do these categories. And so I don't know, like maybe that would be helpful for someone to hear, but these are categories that help me. So this was all in regards to one person. The first category that I have is beware/pay attention. And what I have under that is he getting more consistently mean and irritable over time or less mean and irritable? And that just causes me to pause and try and remember. I ask myself, and this is what I wrote out to myself, is your brain being rewired to be addicted to texting and talking only for him to discard you later? So that makes me have to pause and check in. Does it feel like I'm getting addicted to texting and talking? Because that's not a healthy relationship. I don't care who says it is, it's not. So does it feel like that's happening? Because that's not good. I ask myself, are you fighting more often or less? And then I have to pause and try and think about it. Is he contradicting himself at all? Have you become a better person or a worse person since talking to him? That is like a really important one to ask myself. And that was something that I just kind of thought up. I also asked myself and wrote out, am I tolerating things right now that I would not have tolerated in the beginning? And then I have to try and think about that. And then I wrote out a couple of things in response to that I could think of at the time. Because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes my brain just wants to be like in denial about it, you know? So I wrote out that I had lower self-esteem, I had more anxiety, and I did notice that my goals were shifting. That's good to know. Even if I don't do anything about it, even if I'm not ready to leave this person yet, that I will see that I wrote that to myself months down the road. I'll see that I wrote that to myself 3 months ago. And I might not have even remembered that I felt that way 3 months ago. But 3 months down the line, I will have that documented for myself. I asked myself, how does he actually show me love? Because, and then in response to that question, I wrote, he doesn't respect my time. He calls me even when I say I'm unavailable. He doesn't respect my effort. You know, he's always telling me that he wants more and more and more, never saying thank you for anything. And I said he doesn't try to be available 24/7. Everything's on his time all the time. So that is a contradiction. And I also wrote down that he is a liar, not because I know that he's lied to me about anything, but because I can see that he lies to himself. That was such a big thing for me to realize, that even if I never knew if they lied to me about anything, how can they be honest with me if they are lying to themselves, period. Another category that I wrote out is the what don't you trust about them section. Again, this just allows me to kind of like talk to myself without judgment, because a lot of times it'll almost get to this place where you're like, oh, I shouldn't even think that. Like their judgment towards you gets in your head, and then you're judgmental towards yourself about your own thoughts. And so asking questions like this allows me to just talk without trying to like figure out if it's right or if it's wrong or if I'm crazy or if they're right. I just ramble. And so it just allows me to say, okay, judgment-free, what don't I trust about them? What am I nervous about? Whether it's right or whether it's wrong, what am I nervous about? And with this person, I wrote that I was nervous that when he wasn't answering his phone, it's because he was on the phone with, he had a lot of female friends, that he was on the phone with another female friend, and that maybe that was just something going on that he wasn't going to tell me about. Again, not placing judgment on him, not placing judgment on myself, just stating that fear out loud, that I was worried that he was sometimes blowing me off for some of his female friends. Because there would be times where he wouldn't answer his phone for like hours on end, and he would talk to me on the phone for hours, right? So I was like, is this a different girl that he's talking to on the phone for like hours? I don't know. Another thing, that he won't have good boundaries with any of the women in his life. Again, not judging him, not saying like, therefore he's an asshole, not calling myself crazy for thinking that, just stating it out loud. And I think why this category is powerful for me is, again, because maybe in the moment I just need to write it down and I can't process it any more than that. But if I'm in like if there's a day down the road, even maybe a few days down the road or tomorrow where I'm reading this, I might be able to see that pretty clearly for what it is, which is that maybe I'm noticing something about this guy and his behavior that I'm not allowing myself to actually like notice. Because sometimes I'll write this stuff out and I'll see themes in it where I'm like, wow, I really am kind of worried about them cheating. And I didn't even realize that I was worried about them cheating, because it'll be all these different things about women that I'm writing out. And I didn't even know I was that worried about women until I read all of it. You know what I'm saying? So it helps me see the patterns to my own thoughts as well. I was worried that he had like a really close relationship with his ex-wife who he shared a kid with. And all of these dudes that have like kids with ex-wives are always like acting like I have no right to tell them how to have their relationship with their ex-spouse who they're freakishly close to because they have children together, even though his daughter's like literally remarried and grown up. So anyway, I was just saying that I was nervous that him and his ex-wife would use grandchildren as an excuse to talk more, since they already use their daughter as an excuse to talk a lot, that he will hide things from me that he doesn't want me to discover, that he will go back to flirting with girls behind my back. So there's like kind of a theme here. Obviously, I don't trust this person, right? I mean, I can see that. So then it becomes the question, if that note helps me realize that, that's a step forward to where then I have to start asking myself, why am I with somebody that I don't trust, you know? And then just the last category in this email is I wrote out ways that this person is like past men that I've dated. And I'll just allow myself to kind of like compare notes. And that's actually really helpful for me too. In this one, I wrote that he doesn't do anything sweet for me ever. He doesn't care if I'm sad. He only seems to care when I say that I'm going to leave. So those are the only two things that I wrote, but there's been other things that I've noticed in terms of how secretive they are, how much they like physically hide their phone from me, things like that. But if I try and like compare how they're similar to past dudes, that can sometimes help me realize stuff too. So anyway, in essence, that is pretty much my plumb line, and I hope maybe this video was helpful. Feel free to comment in section below as always. So see ya.